Ambassador Zixthara's four eyes trembled as she stared at the tactical display. The massive screen showed thousands of red dots surrounding her homeworld of Velthara Prime. Each dot represented a Krillian warship, their hulls bristling with plasma cannons and antimatter torpedoes. The peaceful blue-green planet that had been her people's sanctuary for millennia was now trapped in a cage of death. "How long do we have?" she asked, her translator converting her melodic voice into the common galactic tongue. General Mordak, his reptilian features grim, consulted his datapad. 3 solar cycles at most. Their blockade is complete. No supplies can reach the surface, and our orbital defenses won't last another day. The Veltharans had always been a peaceful species. Their greatest achievements were in art, philosophy, and healing. They had never built weapons of war, never needed to. The Galactic Council had promised protection to all member worlds. But when the Krillian Empire had declared war on the entire galaxy, that protection had crumbled like sand. Zixthara moved to the communication console, her 6 limbs working with practiced efficiency. Around her, the emergency council chamber buzzed with desperate activity. Scientists and diplomats huddled over displays, searching for any solution that didn't exist. "Open a channel to the Galactic Council emergency frequency," she ordered. The technician, a young Veltharan named Kilmora, looked up with hope in his large, luminous eyes. "Ambassador, the Council declared neutrality last cycle." "They won't— I'm not calling the Council," Zixthara interrupted. Her voice carried a weight that made everyone in the room pause. "I'm calling for anyone willing to help." The emergency frequency crackled to life. It was chaos. Dozens of worlds were crying out for aid as the Krillian war machine swept across the galaxy. The Andromedans were extinct. The crystal cities of Zephyria lay in ruins. Even the mighty Thoraxians with their impenetrable exoskeletons and plasma rifles had fallen. Zixthara took a deep breath and activated the transmitter. "This is Ambassador Zixthara of Velthara Prime to any vessel, any fleet, any civilization capable of rendering aid. We are a peaceful world of 12 billion souls. We have no weapons, no defenses. The Krillian Armada surrounds us. We are prepared to offer anything in exchange for protection. Our medical knowledge, our art archives, our entire planetary treasury. Please, if anyone can hear this transmission," her voice broke. In the background, the sound of orbital bombardment had begun. The Krillians were testing their defenses, probing for weaknesses. The few defensive satellites the Veltharans possessed were already failing. "We have children here," she continued, tears flowing down her pale cheeks. "Millions of children who have never seen war, never known violence. They're in the shelters now, asking why the sky is burning. I don't know what to tell them." The transmission echoed across the galaxy, bouncing off relay stations and subspace beacons. Most civilizations were too busy with their own survival to respond. Others had already been conquered or destroyed. The few neutral worlds that remained had sealed their borders and gone dark. But the signal reached farther than the established galactic networks. It traveled along ancient hyperspace routes that had been abandoned for millennia. It pierced the galactic barrier itself, reaching into unexplored space where few dared to venture. On the outer rim of the galaxy, in a region marked on all star charts as dangerous, do not enter, something heard the call. Admiral Sarah. Chen was reviewing casualty reports when the communication officer burst into her ready room aboard the UNS Defiance. The young ensign's face was flushed with excitement and urgency. "Admiral, you need to hear this. We picked up a distress signal on the emergency frequencies." Sarah looked up from her datapad, her dark eyes reflecting the weight of command. The Defiance was the flagship of humanity's first expeditionary fleet, sent to explore beyond the galactic rim after Earth scientists had detected signs of intelligent life. They'd been out here for 2 years, making contact with various species, most of whom fled in terror after their first encounter with humans. "Put it through," Sarah ordered. The ambassador's desperate plea filled the room. Sarah listened in silence, her jaw tightening with each word. When the transmission ended, the room was quiet except for the hum of the ship's engines. "Where's this coming from?" Sarah asked. "Approximately 47,000 light-years from our current position, ma'am. Deep in the galactic core region." Sarah stood and moved to the viewport. Outside, the twisted space of the galactic barrier shimmered with exotic energies that would tear apart most ships. Only human vessels, built with their characteristic over-engineering and redundant systems, could survive the journey. "What do we know about these Krillians?" she asked. The ensign consulted his tablet. Limited data, Admiral. From what we've intercepted, they appear to be a highly aggressive species that's been conquering the galaxy for the past year. Every world they take is either enslaved or exterminated. Sarah nodded grimly. She'd seen species like this before, though not on such a scale. Earth's own history was full of conquerors and tyrants. The difference was that humanity had learned to fight back. Order all ships to battle stations, she commanded. Plot a course for this Velthara Prime, maximum burn. The ensign hesitated. Admiral, the fleet regulations state that we're not to interfere in galactic conflicts without authorization from Earth Command. The nearest relay station is 6 months away. Sarah turned from the viewport, her expression hard as steel. Ensign, I've spent most of my life fighting bullies. From schoolyard thugs to corporate pirates to alien raiders, I've never needed permission to do what's right. She activated the fleet-wide communication system. Her voice carried to every ship in the expeditionary force. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and the massive carrier UNS Retribution. 27 vessels in total, each one packed with enough firepower to level a continent. This is Admiral Chen to all ships. We've received a distress call from a peaceful world under attack by hostile forces. I know we're supposed to be explorers, not warriors, but sometimes the universe doesn't give us a choice. Any captain who wishes to withdraw may do so without prejudice. For the rest of us, we have a job to do. Not a single ship broke formation. The fleet turned toward the galactic core, their fusion drives burning bright against the cosmic darkness. They had no idea what awaited them, no knowledge of the galaxy's politics or the Krillian Empire's strength. All they knew was that someone had called for help, and humans had never been good at ignoring such calls. Behind them, automated probes began transmitting their intentions back toward Earth. It would be months before the message arrived, but when it did, it would trigger the largest military mobilization in human history. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened the innocent while humanity was listening. The journey through hyperspace was unlike anything the human fleet had experienced before. As they traveled deeper into the galactic core, space itself seemed to thicken around them. The stars grew denser, their light painting the void in brilliant colors that human eyes had never seen. Captain Marcus Rivera stood on the bridge of the UNS Thunderbolt, watching the navigation display with growing concern. The gravitational forces in this region were enormous, requiring constant course corrections to avoid being pulled into one of the dozen black holes that dotted their path. ETA to target system? He asked his navigator. 18 hours at current speed, sir. But Captain, these hyperspace lanes are unstable. Most of our charts show this entire region as uninhabitable. Rivera nodded. The expeditionary fleet had been designed for long-range exploration, but even their advanced ships were being pushed to their limits. The humans had built their vessels tough, perhaps tougher than any other species in the galaxy, but they were venturing into space that had been abandoned for good reason. On the UNS Defiance, Admiral Chen was reviewing intelligence reports with her staff. What they'd learned about the galactic political situation was disturbing. The Krillian Empire wasn't just another aggressive species. They were systematic exterminators. Every world they conquered was stripped of resources and life. According to intercepted communications, they've destroyed over 300 civilizations in the past year alone, reported Commander Jackson, her intelligence officer. The galactic government collapsed 6 months ago. There's no organized resistance left. Chen studied the tactical projections. The Krillian fleet was massive. Thousands of ships arranged in a perfect blockade formation around Velthara Prime. Their technology appeared to be advanced, though not beyond human capabilities. What made them dangerous was their numbers and their complete lack of mercy. What about the defenders? She asked. Minimal. The Veltharans are a peaceful species with no military tradition. Their orbital platforms are designed for asteroid defense, not warfare. They'll be overwhelmed within hours. Chen turned to her tactical officer. Analysis of enemy capabilities? Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park brought up a holographic display showing Krillian ship designs based on long-range sensor data. Their vessels appear to rely heavily on energy weapons, plasma cannons and particle beams. Moderate shielding, but their armor looks thin. They're built for fighting other galactic species, not for prolonged combat. Weaknesses? Their formation is designed to prevent escape, not to repel attack. They're spread thin across a wide perimeter. If we hit them hard and fast, we could punch through before they can reorganize. Chen smiled grimly. It was the kind of tactical situation humans excelled at. Outnumbered, outgunned, but with the advantage of surprise and superior training. Meanwhile, on Velthara Prime, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Krillian bombardment had intensified, and the planet's few defensive satellites had been reduced to debris. In the underground shelters, millions of Veltharans huddled together, their musical voices raised in ancient songs of peace and hope. Ambassador Zixithera remained in the command center, coordinating evacuation efforts and trying to maintain morale. The reports coming in were devastating. 3 major cities had been hit by kinetic bombardment. The death toll was climbing toward 1 million. Any response to our distress call? She asked for the 100th time. General Mordak shook his head sadly. Nothing, Ambassador. I'm sorry. Outside, the Krillian Fleet Admiral Tekmor the Destroyer observed the bombardment from his flagship with satisfaction. The Veltharans were proving even weaker than intelligence reports had suggested. Their world would be stripped clean within a cycle, its population either enslaved for labor or processed for biological resources. Resistance has ceased, reported his tactical officer, a scarred veteran of a dozen conquests. Should we begin the landing assault? Tekmor considered. The Krillian Empire had learned to be thorough. Better to spend an extra day in bombardment than risk casualties in ground combat. Continue orbital strikes. Target population centers and industrial facilities. When nothing moves on the surface, then we land. He turned back to the tactical display, already planning the fleet's next target. According to intelligence, there was a cluster of mineral-rich worlds 3 systems away. Easy conquests that would fuel the Empire's expansion even further. The display suddenly flickered. His sensor officer looked up with confusion. Admiral, I'm detecting hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system. Reinforcements? Tekmor asked. He wasn't expecting support, but the Empire often sent additional fleets to accelerate conquest operations. Unknown configuration, sir. The signatures don't match any vessel in our database. On the sensor display, 27 contacts appeared at the edge of the Velthara system. They were moving fast, much faster than Galactic standard for system approach. Their energy signatures were strange, reading far higher than their apparent size should allow. Scan those vessels, Tekmor ordered. Identify their origin. The sensor officer worked frantically at his console. Sir, I'm getting readings unlike anything in our files. Their hull composition appears to be some kind of metallic composite reinforced with exotic matter. Their power signatures suggest they're running reactors far beyond Galactic standard. One of the unknown ships broke from formation and accelerated toward the Krillian fleet. As it approached, its configuration became clear. It was unlike any vessel the Krillians had ever seen. Where Galactic ships were sleek and efficient, this one was angular and aggressive. Its hull bristled with weapons that didn't match any known technology. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. Put it through, Tekmor commanded. The main screen flickered, revealing a bipedal creature unlike any species in the Galactic database. It had pale skin, short dark fur on its head, and predatory eyes that seemed to look right through the screen. When it spoke, its voice was calm but carried an undertone of barely controlled violence. This is Captain Rivera of the United Nations ship Thunderbolt. You are hereby ordered to cease your attack on Velthara Prime and withdraw from this system immediately. Tekmor's officers looked at each other in confusion. The translation was clear, but the words made no sense. No one gave orders to the Krillian Empire. Unknown vessel, Tekmor replied. You are interfering in Imperial operations. Identify your species and state your business or be destroyed. The creature on the screen smiled, revealing white teeth that were clearly designed for tearing flesh. My species? We're called humans. Our business? We heard someone calling for help. Humans? Tekmor consulted his database. No match found. Your species is not recognized by Imperial records. You have no authority in this matter. Withdraw or face the consequences. The human's smile grew wider. Admiral, let me explain something about humans. We have a saying back home. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We've traveled 47,000 light years because someone asked for help. We're not leaving empty-handed. The transmission ended. Tekmor stared at the blank screen for a moment, then began to laugh. A single ship, crewed by an unknown species, was threatening the entire Krillian armada. Weapons officer, destroy that vessel. Make an example of these humans. But even as he gave the order, Techmore noticed something troubling on the tactical display. The other human ships had spread out across the system perimeter, moving into positions that looked uncomfortably familiar. It was an attack formation, one that suggested these newcomers knew exactly what they were doing. The galaxy was about to witness something that hadn't been seen in over 1,000 years, someone fighting back against the Krillian Empire, and winning. The first Krillian plasma blast should have vaporized the UNS Thunderbolt. Instead, it splashed harmlessly against the ship's deflector shields, the energy dissipating in brilliant cascades of light. Captain Rivera watched the display with professional interest. "Well, that tickled," he commented to his crew. "Return fire. Let's show them what human engineering looks like." The Thunderbolt's main railgun fired a single tungsten slug at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectile covered the distance between ships in milliseconds, punching through the Krillian vessel's shields as if they didn't exist. The impact shattered the enemy ship's hull, sending debris spinning into space. Across the Krillian fleet, alarm klaxons began to wail. Admiral Techmore stared at his tactical display in disbelief. One of his destroyers had just been destroyed by a single shot from an unknown weapon type. "How is that possible?" he demanded. His tactical officer was frantically analyzing the sensor data. "Admiral, their projectile weapon used kinetic energy rather than plasma or particle beams. Our shields are calibrated for energy weapons. They offer minimal protection against solid projectiles at those velocities. Then recalibrate them." "Sir, our shield generators can't be modified quickly enough. It would take hours to reprogram the entire fleet." Techmore's blood ran cold. For the first time in decades of conquest, he faced an enemy that could hurt his ships, but he still commanded over 2,000 vessels against 27 human ships. The odds were still overwhelmingly in his favor. "All ships, attack formation Delta 7, surround and destroy the human fleet." The Krillian armada began to move, their ships breaking from the blockade formation to engage the human vessels. But Admiral Chen had anticipated this response. As the enemy ships maneuvered, the human fleet executed a battle plan that had been refined through centuries of warfare. "All ships, implement hammer and anvil protocol," Chen ordered over the fleet communication channel. "Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves today." The human formation split into 3 groups. The heavy battleships formed the anvil, taking position between the Krillian fleet and Velthara Prime. The faster cruisers and destroyers became the hammer, sweeping around the enemy flanks in a wide arc. The carrier UNS Retribution hung back, launching its complement of fighters and bombers. The first major engagement began as 300 Krillian ships converged on the human battleships. The aliens expected to overwhelm the small human force through sheer numbers. Instead, they encountered something unprecedented in their experience: coordinated defensive fire. Human point defense systems had been designed to stop everything from missiles to asteroids. Against Krillian plasma bolts, they proved devastatingly effective. Streams of coherent energy were intercepted by laser grids and particle beams, creating a defensive barrier that seemed impenetrable. Meanwhile, the human return fire was surgically precise. Each battleship carried enough firepower to level a continent, but more importantly, human targeting systems were far superior to anything the galaxy had ever seen. Every shot hit its mark, and every hit destroyed or crippled an enemy vessel. Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the UNS Indomitable, one of the fleet's heavy battleships. Her ship had taken hits from dozens of Krillian vessels, but her armor held. Human warships were built to survive, a lesson learned from Earth's violent history. "Target the largest ships first," she ordered her weapons officer. "Cut the head off the snake." The Indomitable's main gun spoke in unison, sending a spread of relativistic projectiles toward a Krillian dreadnought. The massive enemy vessel tried to evade, but human fire control predicted its movement. The tungsten slugs tore through the alien ship's hull, detonating its reactor in a brilliant flash of light. On Velthara Prime, Ambassador Zixathara watched the battle through the few remaining orbital sensors. What she saw defied everything she knew about warfare. The humans were outnumbered 70-1, yet they were winning. Their ships moved with purpose and precision, each vessel working in perfect coordination with the others. "Who are these humans?" she whispered. General Mordak was equally amazed. "I've never seen anything like their tactics. Look at how they use their smaller ships, and they're not just attacking. They're herding the Krillians into kill zones. Indeed, The human cruisers and destroyers were executing a maneuver of breathtaking complexity. They darted between Krillian formations, striking hard and fast before disappearing behind asteroids or debris fields. Every attack was calculated to drive enemy ships toward the waiting guns of the human battleships. Admiral Thekmore realized too late that he was being outmaneuvered. His fleet, designed for overwhelming weaker opponents, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that understood warfare on a level he'd never encountered. "Retreat to defensive formation Gamma 2, he ordered desperately. "Concentrate fire on their largest vessels." But the humans had anticipated this as well. As the Krillian fleet tried to reorganize, the UNS Retribution's fighter squadron struck. Human pilots trained in three-dimensional combat swept through the Krillian formations like avenging angels. Their fighters were smaller and faster than anything the aliens possessed, armed with weapons that could cripple much larger vessels. Commander Jake Viper Thompson led the first fighter squadron into the heart of the enemy formation. His craft, barely larger than an atmospheric fighter, danced between plasma bolts that would have destroyed a conventional ship. "Fox 3, Fox 3, he called out, launching a spread of antimatter torpedoes into a cluster of Krillian cruisers. The explosions lit up space like miniature suns. Behind him, his wingmen followed suit, each pilot displaying the kind of skill that came from generations of aerial combat tradition. Human fighters had evolved from atmospheric aircraft, and they brought with them tactics that three-dimensional space combat had never seen before. The tide of battle was turning decisively in humanity's favor, but Admiral Chen wasn't satisfied with mere victory. She had studied the intelligence reports about Krillian operations across the galaxy. This wasn't just about saving Velthera Prime. It was about sending a message. "All ships target their command vessel," she ordered. "I want Admiral Thekmore alive if possible. He has questions to answer." The human fleet converged on the Krillian flagship, their combined firepower systematically dismantling its defenses. Thekmore watched in horror as his mighty armada was reduced to burning wreckage. Ships that had conquered hundreds of worlds were being destroyed by an enemy that shouldn't even exist. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission from the human flagship." Thekmore nodded grimly. He had no choice but to listen. Admiral Chen appeared on his screen, her expression cold and professional. Behind her, the bridge of her ship hummed with quiet efficiency. "Admiral Thekmore, your fleet is defeated. Surrender now, and your surviving crews will be treated according to the laws of war." "What are the laws of war?" Thekmore asked, genuinely confused. The concept was alien to Krillian thinking. Chen's expression softened slightly as if she were speaking to a child. "Rules that civilized species follow during combat. Protection for prisoners, care for the wounded, prohibition against targeting civilians, basic concepts of mercy and honor." Thekmore laughed bitterly. "Mercy is weakness. Honor is a luxury for those who can afford it." "No," Chen replied quietly. "Mercy is strength. Honor is what separates us from animals. You're about to learn the difference." The transmission ended and Thekmore found himself facing a choice he'd never imagined making. Around him, his bridge crew looked to him for orders, but for the first time in his career, the Admiral had no idea what to do next. Admiral Thekmore's flagship shuddered as another human salvo struck its weakening shields. Around him, control panels sparked and smoke filled the air. His once mighty fleet was now scattered debris floating in the void, with fewer than 200 ships remaining from his original force of over 2,000. "Sir, hull breach on decks 7 through 12, reported his damage control officer. "We've lost main propulsion and half our weapon systems." Thekmore closed his eyes. In Krillian culture, defeat meant death. There was no concept of surrender, no protocol for retreat. A commander either returned victorious or didn't return at all. But these humans had introduced concepts that challenged everything he believed. "Open a channel to the human admiral," he said quietly. The transmission connected, showing Admiral Chen's steady gaze. Behind her, Thekmore could see human officers working with calm professionalism despite being in the middle of a battle. It was another alien concept, maintaining composure under pressure. "I surrender," Thekmore said, the word feeling strange on his tongue. "My remaining ships will stand down." Chen nodded. "Understood. Order your vessels to power down weapons and prepare to receive boarding parties. Any ship that complies will be spared. Any ship that continues to fight will be destroyed." Within minutes, the surviving Krillian vessels had powered down their weapons. The humans moved with startling efficiency, sending boarding parties to secure each ship while medical teams treated the wounded, both human and alien. This last part confused the Krillian survivors most of all. Captain Rivera found himself aboard Thekmor's flagship, leading a squad of Marines through corridors filled with wounded Krillians. When they encountered a group of injured aliens, Rivera immediately called for medical assistance. "But sir," one of his Marines said, "they're the enemy." Rivera looked at the wounded Krillians, their reptilian features twisted in pain and confusion. "Not anymore, Sergeant. They're prisoners of war and they're hurt. We treat them." This simple act of mercy rippled through the Krillian survivors like a shockwave. They had expected execution or torture, the standard fate of defeated enemies in their empire. Instead, human medics worked alongside their own medical staff, sharing supplies and techniques to save lives. On Velthara Prime, the population emerged from their shelters to witness something unprecedented. The orbital bombardment had stopped. The alien fleet that had threatened their world was either destroyed or captured. And in the distance, strange new ships were taking up protective positions around their planet. Ambassador Zixthera stood in the ruins of her capital city, looking up at the stars through a gap in the dome that had protected the city center. Human shuttles were beginning to land, carrying medical supplies and relief workers. The first human to set foot on Velthara Prime was Dr. Sarah Kim, a xenobiologist and emergency physician. She stepped off the shuttle carrying a medical kit that was larger than most Veltharans, her height and build marking her clearly as a member of a heavy world species. "Ambassador Zixthera?" Dr. Kim asked, her universal translator converting her words into the musical Veltharan language. "I'm Dr. Kim. We're here to help with your wounded." Zixthera looked up at the human woman, noting the strength in her frame and the kindness in her eyes. You came? You actually came?" "Someone called for help," Dr. Kim replied simply. "We answer those calls." Over the following hours, human aid flowed into Velthara Prime like a river. Medical teams worked alongside Veltharan doctors to treat the wounded. Engineers began repairing damaged infrastructure with technologies that seemed almost magical to the peaceful aliens. Food and water supplies materialized as if from nowhere. But perhaps most importantly, human soldiers took up defensive positions around population centers and critical facilities. For the first time since the attack began, the Veltharans felt truly safe. In space, Admiral Chen was conducting her first interrogation of Admiral Thekmor. The Krillian commander sat in the human detention facility, his reptilian features showing a mixture of confusion and grudging respect. "I don't understand your species," Thekmor said. "You could have simply destroyed my fleet and taken this world for yourselves. Instead, you heal our wounded and protect people you've never met. Why?" Chen considered the question carefully. "Because it's right. Because strength without compassion is just brutality. Because someone has to stand up to bullies. But what do you gain from this? The satisfaction of knowing we did the right thing. The knowledge that tonight 12 billion Veltharans will sleep safely because we chose to act." Thekmor shook his head.
"In the Empire, such thinking would be considered weakness. And how has that worked out for your Empire?"
Chen asked pointedly. "You've conquered hundreds of worlds, enslaved billions, destroyed entire civilizations. What have you built? What have you created? What legacy will you leave behind besides fear and ashes?" The question struck Thekmor like a physical blow. In all his years of conquest, he had never considered what the Empire was actually accomplishing beyond the accumulation of power and resources. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, news of the Krillian defeat was spreading like wildfire. Species that had gone into hiding began to emerge. Refugees who had fled their homeworld started to hope, and in the deepest corners of space, resistance movements began to form. The Andromedans, thought extinct, revealed that some of their number had survived in hidden colonies. The Thoraxians, who had fought bravely before being overwhelmed, began regrouping their scattered forces. Even species that had surrendered to the Krillians without fighting began to reconsider their positions. On the human flagship, communications were pouring in from across the galaxy. Requests for aid, offers of alliance, intelligence about Krillian positions and weaknesses. Admiral Chen found herself at the center of something much larger than a rescue mission. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. It's coming through the emergency relay network." Chen accepted the transmission, and the image of Fleet Admiral James Morrison appeared on her screen. Morrison was an old friend and mentor, his weathered face showing the strain of coordinating humanity's response to the galactic crisis. "Sarah, I've been following your situation through the probe reports. Good work out there, but I need you to know what's happening back home." Chen felt a chill. "What's the situation, sir?" "The President has authorized Operation Righteousness. Every available ship, every Marine division, every pilot we can spare. We're mobilizing the entire human fleet for galactic deployment. 3,000 ships are already en route to your position, with more following." The implications hit Chen like a thunderbolt. Humanity was committing to galactic war on a scale never before imagined. The peaceful expedition she had led into space was about to become the spearhead of the largest military operation in human history. "Our mission parameters?" she asked. Morrison's expression was grim but determined. "Liberation of all worlds under Krillian occupation, destruction of the Empire's military capacity, and establishment of a new galactic order based on protection of the innocent." Chen looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, thousands of human ships were racing toward battles that would determine the fate of an entire galaxy. Humanity had answered the call for help, and now there would be no turning back. The age of Krillian dominance was ending. The age of human protection was about to begin. 3 weeks after the liberation of Velthara Prime, the human fleet had grown from 27 ships to over 300. Vessels from Earth arrived daily through the hyperspace corridors, bringing reinforcements, supplies, and technologies that amazed their new galactic allies. Admiral Chen stood in the newly established command center on Velthara Prime, studying a holographic map of the galaxy. Red zones marked Krillian-controlled space, which still covered nearly 60% of inhabited worlds. Yellow zones showed contested systems where resistance movements were fighting with human support. Green zones represented liberated worlds under human protection. "Status report," she requested from her staff. Commander Jackson stepped forward with his datapad. "Admiral, we've successfully liberated 17 systems in the past 2 weeks. The Andromedans have re-established contact with their hidden colonies and are contributing their advanced shield technologies to our fleet upgrades. The Thoraxians have formed 3 full battle groups and are requesting joint operations. Casualties? Minimal, ma'am. Human losses are at 2%, well within acceptable parameters. Enemy casualties are approximately 70% across all engagements, with the remainder surrendering or retreating." Chen nodded, but her expression remained troubled. The numbers were good, too good. "What about the Krillian response? They can't be ignoring what's happening." Lieutenant Commander Park brought up a new section of the galactic map. "Intelligence suggests they're consolidating forces around their core worlds. Emperor Vextar has recalled fleets from the outer territories to defend the imperial capital. We estimate they're massing over 10,000 ships in the Krillio system." 10,000 ships, Chen repeated thoughtfully. "They're planning something big." Before anyone could respond, the communication system chimed with an incoming priority transmission. The holographic display showed Ambassador Zixathera, but she was no longer the frightened diplomat who had sent out the original distress call. 3 weeks of working alongside humans had transformed her into something approaching a military coordinator. "Admiral Chen," Zixathera began, "we've received intelligence from the Zephyrian resistance. The Krillians are planning a massive counterattack. They're calling it the Final Purge, an operation to destroy every world that has allied with humanity." Chen's blood ran cold. "How reliable is this intelligence?" "Very reliable. The source is a Krillian admiral who defected after witnessing how we treat prisoners. He's provided complete tactical data on their battle plans. The defector was Admiral Kefshan, once one of the Empire's most trusted commanders. His meeting with human representatives had shattered everything he believed about warfare and civilization. Now he sat in the human command center, his reptilian features showing a mixture of shame and determination. "The Emperor has gone mad with rage," Kefshan explained through the translator. "He cannot accept that his empire is failing. The Final Purge is designed to destroy over 300 worlds simultaneously. Every planet that has cooperated with humans will be subjected to complete orbital bombardment." Chen studied the tactical data Kefshan had provided. The plan was horrifyingly comprehensive. Krillian fleets would strike simultaneously across the galaxy, overwhelming local defenses before human reinforcements could arrive. Billions would die in the first hours of the assault. "When?" Chen asked simply. 7 solar cycles from now, the fleets are already moving into position. 7 days to prevent the largest act of genocide in galactic history. Chen felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders. Around the room, her staff waited for orders, their faces reflecting the same grim determination that had driven humanity across the stars. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," Chen ordered, "and patch in all fleet commanders in the liberated zone. We're going to need everyone for this." The next 6 hours were a blur of planning and preparation. Human strategic doctrine called for defensive operations when facing superior numbers. But the scope of the Krillian threat made defense impossible. They would have to attack first, striking at the heart of the Empire before the final purge could begin. Operation Spearpoint was born in those desperate hours of planning. Every human ship in the galaxy would converge on the Krillio system in a massive assault designed to decapitate the Empire's leadership. It was ambitious beyond anything humans had ever attempted, requiring coordination across impossible distances and precise timing that left no room for error, Admiral. Morrison's voice crackled across the interstellar communication network as he addressed the combined human fleet. "Ladies and gentlemen, we stand at a crossroads of history. In 7 days, the Krillian Empire will attempt to murder 300 worlds to maintain their grip on power. We cannot, we will not, allow this to happen." Across dozens of star systems, human crews listened to their commander's words. On the UNS Indomitable, Captain Vasquez gathered her crew in the main hangar bay. On the UNS Thunderbolt, Captain Rivera briefed his officers on their role in the upcoming assault. Thousands of similar scenes played out across the human fleet. "This won't be like our previous engagements," Morrison continued. "We'll be facing the concentrated might of the Krillian Empire in their most heavily defended system. Many of us won't be coming home, but I can think of no better cause to fight for than the protection of the innocent." The preparation was intense. Human engineers worked around the clock to upgrade Allied vessels with human technology. Thoraxian battle groups practiced coordination with human squadrons. Andromedan scientists shared their knowledge of Krillian weaknesses. For the first time in galactic history, dozens of species were working together toward a common goal. Dr. Kim found herself aboard the UNS Defiance, preparing medical facilities for the massive casualties expected from the assault. As she worked, she reflected on how much had changed since that first distress call from Velthera Prime. Humanity had gone from explorers to liberators to the guardians of galactic civilization. "Doctor," one of her assistants called out, "we're receiving wounded from the advanced scouts. The casualties were from reconnaissance missions probing Krillian defenses around their home system." What the scouts had found was sobering. Layer upon layer of defensive installations, millions of automated defense platforms, and a fleet concentration that dwarfed anything previously encountered. Commander Jake Thompson, the fighter pilot who had distinguished himself at Velthara Prime, was among the wounded scouts. His fighter had been hit by Krillian defensive fire during a deep penetration mission, but he'd managed to gather crucial intelligence before barely escaping with his life. "Doc," he said as Dr. Kim treated his injuries, "you need to see what they've built out there. It's like nothing we've ever faced. The entire system is one giant fortress." Dr. Kim nodded as she worked. "Can we win?" Thompson was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, but I know we have to try. There are too many people counting on us to give up now." Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place. Human crews writing letters home that might never be delivered. Allied species saying goodbye to families they might never see again. Everyone understood the stakes and everyone understood the odds. But there was something else in the air, a determination that transcended species boundaries. The galaxy had lived under Krillian tyranny for too long. Someone had finally stood up to the bullies, and that someone was willing to see the fight through to the end. Admiral Chen stood in her ready room aboard the UNS Defiance, looking out at the assembled fleet. Over 3,000 ships from a dozen species all united in a common cause. It was the largest military force ever assembled, and it was about to attempt the impossible. In 36 hours, they would jump to hyperspace for the final assault on the Krillian homeworld. The fate of the galaxy would be decided in the battles to come. Chen closed her eyes and said a prayer for the billions of innocent lives hanging in the balance. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the future of galactic civilization was racing toward an appointment with destiny. The Krilio system was a fortress beyond imagination. As the combined Liberation fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their sensors revealed the full scope of Emperor Vextar's defensive preparations. Orbital platforms surrounded every major celestial body, their weapons trained on the hyperspace emergence points. The planet Krillios itself was encased in overlapping energy shields that pulsed with enough power to protect a dozen worlds. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance, watching the tactical display with growing concern. Intelligence had estimated strong defenses, but this exceeded their worst-case scenarios. Automated defense satellites numbered in the millions, creating a web of destruction that extended throughout the system. "Fleet status report," she requested. 3,217 vessels ready for combat, Admiral, came the reply. Human forces comprise 1,800 ships, with Allied forces making up the remainder. All vessels report ready for Operation Spearpoint. Chen nodded, studying the enemy positions. The Krillian Empire had pulled ships from across the galaxy for this final battle. Over 10,000 vessels were arranged in defensive formations around their homeworld, with the massive Imperial dreadnought Dominion at their center. Communications. Open a channel to Emperor Vextar. Let's see if we can end this without unnecessary bloodshed. The transmission connected, showing the bridge of the Krillian flagship. Emperor Vextar was an imposing figure even by Krillian standards, his scarred hide bearing the marks of countless battles. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute power and the madness of desperate fury. "So the humans finally come to face their betters," Vextar snarled. "You have disrupted the natural order of the galaxy, interfered with the destiny of superior species. For this you will all die." Chen remained calm in the face of the Emperor's rage. "Your Majesty, we're prepared to offer terms for your surrender. End the final purge operations, release all enslaved populations, and stand down your fleets. In return, we guarantee safe passage for your people to colonize uninhabited worlds." Vextar's laughter was like grinding stone. "Surrender? To a species of primitives who crawled out of some distant mud ball? I am the Emperor of the galaxy. I do not surrender to insects." "Then you've chosen poorly," Chen replied quietly. "All ships execute Spearpoint protocol. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on our souls." The largest space battle in galactic history began with a coordinated assault unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Human battle groups punched through the outer defensive perimeter with precision strikes, their railguns and missile systems overwhelming point defenses that had never faced such concentrated firepower. The UNS Indomitable led the first wave, Captain Vasquez guiding her ship through a storm of plasma fire that would have destroyed lesser vessels. Her heavy battleship's armor absorbed hit after hit, while her guns returned fire with devastating accuracy. "Target the orbital platforms first," she ordered. "Clear a path for the second wave." Meanwhile, Allied forces executed supporting attacks across multiple vectors. Thoraxian battle groups, their ships bristling with the weaponry of a warrior culture, engaged Krillian squadrons in brutal close-quarters combat. Andromedan vessels, protected by their advanced shield technology, served as mobile fortresses, drawing enemy fire while human ships maneuvered for killing shots. Commander Thompson led his fighter squadrons through the chaos of the main battle, his pilots weaving between capital ships like deadly insects. Their mission was crucial: disable the command and control systems that coordinated the massive defensive network. "Gold Squadron, follow me in," Thompson called over the comm. "We're going after the central command station." His fighters dove toward a massive space station that bristled with communication arrays and defensive weapons. The structure was the size of a small moon, its armor designed to withstand bombardment from an entire fleet. But human fighters carried weapons specifically designed for precision strikes against hardened targets. The assault on the command station became a microcosm of the larger battle. Krillian defenders fought with the desperation of those facing extinction, while human pilots displayed the skill and courage that had carried their species across the galaxy. When Thompson's antimatter torpedo finally penetrated the station's core, the explosion could be seen from the edge of the system. With their coordination systems disrupted, the Krillian defensive network began to falter. Admiral Chen seized the opportunity to push the main assault toward the planet itself. The UNS Defiance led a spearhead of heavy battleships through the weakened defenses, their guns systematically dismantling the orbital fortresses that protected the Imperial Palace. Emperor Vextar watched his defenses crumble from the bridge of his flagship. Around him, his officers reported disaster after disaster. The humans weren't just winning. They were making victory look easy. Ships that had conquered hundreds of worlds were being destroyed by enemies they couldn't even hurt in return. "My Emperor," his tactical officer reported with terror in his voice. "The humans have broken through the inner perimeter. Their lead ships will reach planetary orbit within the hour." Vextar's rage finally boiled over. "Activate the planetary destruction protocol. If I cannot rule the galaxy, then no one shall inherit it." His officers stared at him in horror. The planetary destruction protocol would turn Krillios itself into a weapon, detonating the planet's core to create a blast that would sterilize the entire system. Billions of Krillian civilians would die, along with the attacking fleet. "My Emperor," the tactical officer whispered, "that will kill everyone on the planet." My own people have failed me," Vextar screamed. "Better they die as martyrs to the Empire than live as slaves to humans." But as Vextar reached for the activation controls, a familiar voice stopped him cold. Admiral Kefshan materialized on the bridge, flanked by human marines who had teleported aboard during the battle's chaos. "Vextar, I cannot allow you to murder our homeworld," Kefshan said sadly. "Surrender now, and perhaps some good can come from the ashes of our empire." The two Krillian admirals faced each other across the bridge, representing two different visions of their species' future. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew closer as human boarding parties fought their way through the ship's corridors. Vextar drew his ceremonial blade, the ancient weapon that marked his imperial authority. "You dare betray your own emperor? You dare stand with these humans against your own kind?" Kefshan remained calm. "I stand with justice. I stand with mercy. I stand with the possibility that our species can be something more than destroyers." The duel between the two Krillian leaders was brief but decisive. Vextar's rage made him careless, while Kefshan fought with the precision of one who had found peace with his choices. When it ended, the Emperor lay dead on his own bridge, and the Krillian Empire died with him. Kefshan turned to the human marines who had made the teleportation assault possible. "The Empire surrenders unconditionally. Order all Krillian forces to stand down." Across the system, the message went out on all Imperial frequencies. The Emperor was dead, the Empire had fallen, and the galaxy's longest nightmare was finally over. One by one, Krillian ships powered down their weapons and surrendered to the Liberation Fleet. On the UNS Defiance, Admiral Chen accepted the formal surrender from Admiral Kefshan. As she watched Krillian crews evacuating their disabled ships, she felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The immediate crisis was over, but the work of rebuilding galactic civilization was just beginning. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from Krillian fleets across the galaxy. The final purge has been cancelled and their forces are laying down arms." Chen nodded, then activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. The Krillian Empire has surrendered unconditionally. The galaxy is free." The cheer that went up from 3,000 ships echoed across the stars, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of billions of liberated souls. Humanity had answered the call for help, and in doing so had changed the course of galactic history forever. 1 year after the Battle of Krillios, Ambassador Zixthera stood before the newly constructed Galactic Assembly Building on the world of New Haven. The massive structure rose from the surface of what had once been a barren moon, transformed by human terraforming technology into a garden world suitable for dozens of different species. The assembly hall itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Atmospheric zones accommodated the breathing requirements of various species, while gravitational fields could be adjusted for different comfort levels. It was the first truly universal building ever constructed, designed to welcome every form of life in the galaxy. Today marked the first anniversary of liberation, and representatives from over 400 worlds had gathered to formally establish the Galactic Protection Accord. The document, drafted by human legal experts working alongside scholars from dozens of species, would replace the old Galactic Council with something unprecedented, a true democracy based on the protection of the innocent. Admiral Chen, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and appointed as humanity's primary representative to the Assembly, took her place at the speaker's podium. Behind her, the flags of liberated worlds created a colorful tapestry that represented the diversity of galactic civilization. 1 year ago, Chen began, her words translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. A desperate call for help reached human space. Ambassador Zixthera's plea for assistance traveled 47,000 light-years to find us, and we answered. Today, we gather not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals united in common purpose. The audience included beings of every imaginable form. Crystalline entities from the Andromeda sector sat alongside methane-breathing creatures from the Outer Rim. Former Krillian slaves shared benches with their former masters, all of them working together to build something better than what had come before. Dr. Kim, now serving as Director of Galactic Medical Services, had spent the year coordinating relief efforts across hundreds of worlds. The scale of suffering left by the Krillian Empire had been staggering. Billions of refugees, devastated ecosystems, and traumatized populations. But the response had been equally impressive. Human medical technology, combined with the healing arts of species like the Veltharans, had achieved miracles. Worlds that had been strip-mined were being restored. Species on the brink of extinction were being brought back from the edge. Most importantly, former enemies were learning to work together. Admiral Kef Shan, now serving as Director of Rehabilitation Services, had become the face of Krillian redemption. His people, once the galaxy's most feared warriors, were now among its most dedicated protectors. Former Imperial fleets had been converted into humanitarian vessels, carrying aid and supplies to worlds still recovering from centuries of oppression. The transition has not been easy, Kef Shan admitted during his address to the Assembly. My people must live with the shame of what we did under the Empire. But we have learned that redemption is possible through service to others. We pledge our strength to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The transformation of Krillian society had been one of the most remarkable aspects of the post-war period. Exposed to human concepts of mercy and justice, many Krillians had embraced a completely different way of life. Their military efficiency, once used for conquest, now served humanitarian missions across the galaxy. Captain Rivera, commanding the UNS Thunderbolt on patrol duty in the former Imperial territories, had witnessed this transformation firsthand. His ship regularly worked alongside Krillian vessels, and he had been amazed by their dedication to making amends for their past actions. It's incredible, he reported during a recent debriefing. These are the same species that tried to exterminate the Veltharans, and now they're working 16-hour shifts to help rebuild Veltharan cities. I've never seen such a complete cultural transformation. The economic recovery had been equally impressive. Human industrial technology, shared freely with allied worlds, had sparked a renaissance of prosperity. Worlds that had been reduced to subsistence agriculture under Krillian rule were now developing their own space industries. Trade flowed freely along routes that had been closed for centuries. Commander Thompson, now leading the elite Guardian Squadron, patrolled these trade routes with a mix of human and allied vessels. Pirates and raiders occasionally tried to exploit the post-war chaos, but they found themselves facing a unified response from species that had once been bitter enemies. The old galaxy was built on fear, Thompson observed. Ship captains were afraid of pirates, colonies were afraid of raiders, entire species were afraid of the Krillians. Now there's hope instead of fear. People aren't just surviving anymore, they're building something better. The centerpiece of the new galactic order was the Protection Fleet, a multinational force commanded jointly by human and allied officers. Unlike the old Galactic Council's ineffective peacekeeping forces, the Protection Fleet had real teeth. Any world threatened by aggression could call for help, and know that assistance would arrive. The fleet's flagship was the UNS Liberation, a massive vessel built with contributions from dozens of worlds. Its crew included humans, reformed Krillians, Thoraxian warriors, Andromedan scientists, and representatives from scores of other species. It was a living symbol of what cooperation could achieve. As the anniversary celebration continued, holographic displays showed the remarkable changes that had swept across the galaxy. Refugee camps had been replaced by thriving settlements. Former slave worlds were now centers of learning and culture. Species that had been on the brink of extinction were rebuilding their populations, but perhaps the most significant change was in the children. On worlds across the galaxy, Young beings of different species played together, learned together, and grew up seeing diversity as normal rather than threatening. They were the first generation in millennia to grow up free from the shadow of galactic tyranny. Ambassador Zix Thera, now serving as the Assembly's first elected president, took the podium for the closing ceremony. Her transformation from desperate diplomat to galactic leader had been remarkable, but it reflected the broader changes that had swept across the galaxy. "When I sent that distress call 1 year ago," she began, "I was hoping for a miracle. I never imagined that miracle would come in the form of a species we had never heard of, from beyond the edges of our star maps. But humanity taught us something invaluable, that the universe is not a dark and hostile place where only the strong survive." She paused, looking out at the diverse assembly of beings before her. "They taught us that strength comes from protecting the weak, that wisdom comes from embracing diversity, and that true civilization is measured not by what we can destroy, but by what we can build together." The final vote on the Galactic Protection Accord was unanimous. For the first time in recorded history, the entire galaxy had agreed on something. The age of conquest and domination was over. The age of cooperation and protection had begun. As the celebration continued into the night, Admiral Chen stepped outside onto the observation deck of the assembly building. Above her, the stars shone with a different light than they had a year ago. Each point of light represented worlds where beings could sleep safely, knowing that someone would answer if they called for help. Dr. Kim joined her on the deck, both women looking up at the cosmos they had helped transform. "Do you think it will last?" Dr. Kim asked. "This peace we've built?" Chen smiled, thinking of the children playing in the assembly gardens, the former enemies working side by side, and the fleets patrolling the space lanes to protect the innocent. "I think it will last as long as there are people willing to answer when someone calls for help." Far below them, the celebration continued. Beings from hundreds of worlds shared food, music, and stories under the alien stars. It was a scene that would have been impossible just 1 year earlier, but now it felt as natural as breathing. The galaxy had called for help, and humanity had answered. In doing so, they had not only saved worlds, they had saved the very concept of civilization itself. And in the children playing below, in the reformed warriors standing guard, and in the explorers already planning missions to distant galaxies, the future stretched out bright with infinite possibility. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but it was no longer a lonely place. When someone called for help, someone would always answer. That was the human promise, and it had become the galaxy's greatest hope.